Welcome to Here's This Agile Thing. I'm Matt Beam.
I'm Mike Markey.
And I'm Jeff Singleton.
We've been doing this for like 50, 60 episodes or something, but they've always been edited and...
Like 60.
Yeah, something like that. But the idea behind this experiment, this is an experiment, is that maybe it would be fun to hang out Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Central, and talk about Agile things.
Right
Instead
here.
of watching cartoons.
Exactly. 40 years too late for that.
Or maybe this is a replacement for cartoons.
I was just going to say, maybe we're the cartoons now. I don't know.
This could be adult cartoon. No,
Our logo's a cartoon.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully people will join and it will have more of an interactive vibe here. People can chat with us. I don't know where the chat is. It's all an experiment that's unfolding. And then we can edit it down more or less and publish whatever the gems are as individual podcast episodes. But this is like a fun thing to do on Saturday mornings if you're interested in Agile things. So do we have a topic for today? We don't have any guests.
I think you had a topic that you were thinking of.
So there's a guy named Tom Gilb who talks about Musk's engineering philosophy, Musk's methods.
Musk as in Elon Musk?
Musk as in Elon. That's right.
He's somewhat infamous.
Quite infamous. People know him. Yes. Maybe I'll share my screen here and just... browser needs screen sharing permission. Forget it.
Well, what if I could try?
Oh, yeah. I sent you the document in text, actually.
You did.
And so I'm looking at page 2.
Page 2, Musk's engineering philosophy.
Entire screen. This one. Share.
What I thought it... Boom! Excellent. Boom. So you probably want to scroll down to page 2.
That's him. I've seen him on TVs.
Yeah.
That is totally the guy.
Musk's engineering philosophy. Here, let's make it fit on the screen if we can.
What I found interesting about this is it's so simple. It's like only 5 steps. It's and it's funny. I don't know if this is Tom Gilb's language or if it's Elon's, but so just in order, it's number 1, make the requirements less dumb. Right? So there's an assumption that whatever somebody asks for, some of it will stand up to scrutiny and some of it might not, right? So be clear about that. Number 2, try very hard to delete the part or process, so simplify the thing. This all rhymes with Agile more or less. Number 3, simplify and optimize the design. So again, cut down scope, like maximize the amount of work not done. Simplicity is essential. Only after you've done all that do you try to accelerate cycle time. So you've probably gotten things down to as small as possible chunks, and then you want to see how you can get stuff done and get feedback as quickly as possible. And then after that, automate, which rhymes with the DevOps movement, right? Which is now a part of Agile. I just thought this was interesting because Elon is a guy who clearly ships. And he does impossible things like reuses rockets and launches electric car vehicle companies in the last 20 years in the United States. And if you listen to Joe Justice talk about his time there, he was a coach there in 2020 at Tesla. Mm-hmm. And he talked about, I think, literally 11-minute sprints. What I took away was basically obsession with what he calls the definition of done, which means the first one, requirements, right? Getting just basically super obsessed with what are we doing and why are we doing it, and then doing it as quickly as possible. It just is an interesting, with so much Agile frameworks, processes, theoretical discussions, it's like this is I'm not saying this is the right way to do it everywhere or the right, even the natural evolution of wherever you're at in your Agile process, but it's certainly an interesting example of something that works, and I like simplicity. So I thought that's why that was interesting to look at.
Well, the whole engineering philosophy reflects the engineering philosophy. Mm-hmm. It's broken it down to the simplest phase. He's gotten rid of the waste in the statement. Although I kind of there's a lot of semi-infamous events that have surrounded Elon Musk and his products and his things that while he is shipping, and it is impressive that he's doing all that stuff. The electric cars are everywhere. But the truck is there's some really interesting stories around the truck. So there's things like that. He bought Twitter, renamed it he simplified the name, got it down to one letter. You can take any philosophy, and we've seen this. You can take any philosophy to an extreme, to the point where it starts to impact your ability to move forward in a positive way. So if he took this philosophy, if he said to simplify, break it down to the least common thing, or the smallest possible organization, he's cutting fat in the organization. Well, we've seen many times, if you cut too much fat, you're down to single points of failure. So has his philosophy gone that far?
There's one thing, though, and this isn't unique to Tesla or any other organization. I mean, we've seen it in a number of them, where the general philosophy of the leaders, whether it's Bezos or Musk or whoever, sound good. They're good theory. They're sound theory. But when you dig into, especially a large organization, maybe it's not as universally embraced. And so when you begin to pull back the covers, I think the world of Toyota. But the reality is, if you get inside, you're going to find plenty of flaws and inefficiencies. And you think, well, wait a minute, this isn't the Toyota that I thought that everybody's been hyping. And so I do wonder, number one, I do think that those are legit engineering principles. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
and number two, I don't think they're new. I think these are things that he's landed on, that he's found, I believe these things, and this is what I think works. And to a large degree, they have. But, there's always going to be kinks in the larger especially the larger the organization, the more kinks, and a lot harder to begin to bake this in and infuse it throughout the organization. But if you do it from the beginning, I think it's a lot easier. But even then, I think we've seen that as small organizations grow and scale, it becomes a little bit of, I don't know, kind of a roundup to try to, herd all the felines to get them to follow the philosophy, and maybe certain things scale better than others do. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, as General Patton said. Maybe that was Mike Tyson.
I think it was Mike Tyson,
Yeah.
who infamously stormed the beach at Normandy.
Yes. Not a lot of people know that.
And he
'Cause
punched
it's
Patton in the
technically not
face,
true.
right?
That's why it's not well known, because it's actually not true. But yeah, so there's always a gap between the ideal, the North Star, what you're trying to do, and how stuff works out, right? So I think that's totally fair. I thought this was interesting because it rhymes with, when you talk about trying to help companies and your organization become more agile, the most effective way is by focusing at the level of principles, right? And patterns, and so this is it's an interesting way, all of these things rhyme with stuff we've done at different places, and we know in different frameworks and other approaches, but it's like in this context with these people, it became this. And so I just thought that was it's like a speciation thing, right? It's like, this thing has 4 legs and a head, but it's really well adapted to its niche, right? This feels like a niche adaptation that seems to be working in a particular set of circumstances.
Well, I mean, the one thing for sure that it is very engineering centric, and one thing it does provide, it seems to be accepting of the fact that everything's an experiment, right? And that everything is you trying to make the situation better. There were several things, when he was attempting to get the rockets to land on the pad, and they would, or the thing would launch and explode moments later, and everyone on the news is just going, oh, look, it failed. And then he would get on there and go, we had a successful test today. The engine fired and it left the launch pad. So let's on to the next experiment. Like,
it is all in how you frame it. And let's face it, like a lot of people don't like Elon for personal reasons, tribal reasons. And so like you do see people framing it like, because where I understand he was coming from is the thing we were trying to test is, does the engine fire? Does it get off the pad? Mm-hmm. That's the success criteria. And that's the thing they're obsessed with, right? The fact that it blew up later is outside the scope of what they were trying to test. So when people say this is a failure because it blew up, like at some point that could be a misunderstanding. At some point it could be a dishonest interpretation of what they were trying to do in the first place.
Yeah.
I do think that's a real dynamic that's part of this. It isn't necessarily where I wanted to go, but like it is surrounding people. Yeah. Like,
but you can see the iterative, the agile nature of this too, 100%. The experimentation. Like when the first time the rocket lands on the target and then falls over on the landing, the fact it hit the target was
amazing. Yeah.
Yes. And it's real easy to criticize from a distance when you're not part of the thing, right? It's hard to do this stuff. It's emotionally draining. Right. It's a lot of work, and it's super easy to criticize it. So,
and if you had gone a different way, if you had said, all right, we need our first experiment to look successful. So we not only have to get it off the ground, we need to get it in the air. We need to get it to land on this target. We need to have it not fall over at the end. It has to go by the numbers, beginning to end.
Yep.
We have to ship the whole thing.
That the scope is too big. That's what I think you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. And that's 100%. The problem is now you have a whole product that you're trying to deliver instead of let's develop and test incrementally. And we show stakeholders at periodic points, this is where we are. This was the criteria we were trying to meet. Now the problem becomes, at least in the Western world, we have this expectation of, oh, well, we're going to get the whole thing. We see this all the time. And so, to your point, when the rocket lands successfully, well, until it tips over and blows up, did it meet its test criteria? Perhaps. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that the criteria was to, as you say, fire the engine, take off, and
and then we're done.
And then we're done. But then the
unfortunately,
expectation,
it's up in the air, and we have to. It's got to do something.
It's messy, right?
Right. And so if the expectation though is that stakeholders, whether it's the media or whoever, are thinking, oh well, it's supposed to land successfully, maybe the way to mitigate that up front is to say, okay, folks, this is the criteria.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep.
Yeah.
It may land successfully and it may not, but that wasn't part of the criteria. And this is one of the things that when we go into organizations and we're trying to not just retrain teams and leadership, but we're trying to retrain stakeholders in the proper expectations when it's incremental delivery. Because otherwise, if they're expecting to see the whole shebang, it's like, no, that wasn't the plan, okay? Then there's going to be a natural disconnect, right? What 100%. We want is to train them. And I think that's a failure point. Too often, stakeholders don't get trained And this is what the new expectation should be. The teams that are developing for you are developing incrementally. They want to show you, because transparency is good. You like to see where things are going, but don't expect to see the whole shebang in the first iteration. That's not how it works.
Yep. Stakeholder management, communication of expectations. We need your input because you're the one who can confirm that we're going in the right direction and that this, within the scope of what we intend to deliver, that we hit the mark or not. Like, you don't want us to go too far without checking with you because we might wander off course.
Totally have to blow it up,
And then you have to blow it up over the ocean.
There's, but you can see where the shareholder would be looking at that and going, and I don't know if they're shareholders in the Elon Musk world, but where they would go, how much did it cost us to make that thing that just exploded? Like, and you're going to do it again next week, and we're going to do another one 2 weeks after that, and another one 2 weeks after that. Like, this is starting to cost a couple of bucks, and we run into that all the time. It's like we can't afford to fail. Yeah. We can't like, how much is this? How many times are we going to have to pay these people to do things that aren't working? And I'm not saying that's the way to go. I'm just pointing out the reality of what we face when we approach an experimentation mindset.
But that kind of rhymes with the cost accounting mindset, right? That we talked about with a couple of people, Daniel.
Yeah.
Like, if you just look at what it costs as opposed to what it costs and what value it creates, right? Then you're not going to be able to see the whole potential or opportunity. It's hard to make trade-off decisions if you're not looking at that whole picture. Yeah.
Think about Boeing. I mean, what's
to?
it cost them? You know,
yes.
The 737 MAX 8.
Yes. In terms of future deliveries, reputation, like, what's the chances I want to buy a 737 MAX if I'm an operator? Like, based on,
MAX
100%.
8.
Yeah. No, these are complicated. You have to take a more sophisticated view of this stuff.
And I mean, we've heard from time immemorial the maxim of penny.
A penny saved is a
penny wise,
pound
foolish. Foolish. And I think it once again, it applies. If you're trying to scrimp and save and just, optimization is good, but if you're so focused on we're going to scrimp as much as we can on cost, well, you know what? There is going to be a cost down the road. You're going to pay the cost one way or another. So how much do you want to pay? Would you rather pay during development, which we have found is cheaper, than wait till the end and kill a bunch of people?
Yeah, that's a heavy cost. Especially if your development process is tightly focused, like governed in a way that you are taking the small steps and getting confirmation in each step. Like, you can't get too far out over your skis. If you're going in the wrong direction, you'll notice it and be able to adjust. Yeah, these are pretty, again, it's the same basic principles, but like they get it instantiated in all these different ways. It's interesting.
Yeah.
You know, one of the other things is one of those, the principles or philosophies, accelerate cycle time. And I think if you pick that apart, it makes sense. But the fear that I have is that people will just look at that and say, oh, we have to go faster. Not understanding what does it mean to accelerate cycle time? I mean, yeah, at the very basic, it's, shorten that, the time for some particular task. But if you focus on getting faster, guess what? You don't get faster.
Yeah.
So, and it's interesting. That's not the first step in this. It's the fourth step. You only try to accelerate cycle time after you make the requirements less dumb, more clear. You've tried to delete the part of the process. You simplified it. and then you simplify and optimize the design that you're building, only then does he say, okay, now let's try to speed up how quickly I accelerate the cycle time. Because
Well,
you're right. If you're trying to do the wrong thing quicker, that's probably not going to help.
You have to understand the path. It's like you don't start by automating the test. You start by making a test. Then
Why
you
do you need
automate
the
the
test?
test.
Yeah.
Right. You may even manually execute the test to figure out what the steps are so you can automate them. But yeah.
Totally.
I mean, there are things in here that are cool. When he's trying to make requirements less dumb, everything has to have an owner. It's got to, make sure you can justify why we're doing it. Prioritization. I mean, that all definitely rhymes with the stuff that we talk about.
Yeah. I thought there was, so one of the things about the first step, make the requirements less dumb, is that each requirement has to have a name attached.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's spelled out here, but and the reason for that obviously is you want to be able to talk to that person and interrogate. Interrogate's maybe too strong of a word. You want to understand exactly what they were, what problem were they.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You want to probe. You want to clarify as much as possible. Why do you need this? Are we thinking about the problem in the right way? Right? Because that's another rabbit hole that we have seen people go down. They get more into the order taker mode, and somebody says, "Give me a blue button," and I press it, and it spits out this data. We don't know why, but we can certainly burn some engineering time to build it before we realize that it's actually doesn't serve the purpose, or there's an easier way to do it.
Yeah.
And until you get to the person, you can't really. It's hard to tell.
When we were first using extreme programming, a valid experiment that we would do is can you put the blue button on the screen? And some people would say, well, that was a success. I said, no, you have to be able to click it and have it do something. It doesn't have to do the thing you want it to do yet, but it's got to do something. At the very least, it should tell you click the button, right? Some feedback that it wasn't enough to attach to a database. Attach to the database and pull back something from the database, right? To demonstrate that you had actually succeeded at connecting to it.
We would call that vertical slicing, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Mike, you're sharing your screen again.
I did. So this was where you were talking about making things less dumb. So each requirement has a personal specific named owner, not a department.
There you go.
Requirements must be explicitly justified in terms of expected benefits for specific stakeholders.
ROI.
Requirements must be prioritized in terms of contribution to higher level objectives. Assume requirements are wrong. No matter the source, they must survive rigorous tests of clarity, relevance, and cost effectiveness. That one, I think, is largely missing from our world.
Can you repeat that? I'm not sure I caught every part of it.
Assume requirements are wrong.
Interesting.
No matter the source.
So even if it's a senior person?
Yeah.
who might be paying for
Especially
the
if
whole
it's
thing.
a senior person.
This is a hippo.
Yeah, you can see why companies don't do this. This is hard, right? This is a lot of conversation. It's a lot of, you have to think through. I'm thinking of the way that Amazon does these memos, right? Where somebody is required, the way they do meetings is somebody has to sit down and write out, I think it's a 6-page memo, thinking through the proposition they're making, all the possible objections. Like they have to write a long form narrative, because what it does is it forces, like you can't just sit down and spit out whatever the hell's in your head. Some of what is in your head is not that well formed, right? And the process of writing clarifies it for you. So that forces the person to think through exactly what they're proposing, what they're asking for, how people might react to it. And then they come to the meeting and everybody reads silently for like 20 minutes. And then they have the discussion because they want to make sure everybody's prepared, right? It's a lot of work to actually think through all of this stuff. But like, how else do you get to clarity and to know that you're making the right decision and that there's an ROI and that you're going to know how to measure it and all of that stuff you need for good governance?
I don't know if making everyone sit down and read a multi-page document is the way.
I don't
to
know
start.
either, but Amazon, but the fact that Amazon finds it worth doing, like they're a fairly successful company. There must be some reason. I'm not saying it would work for every company, but like it's interesting to look at their real life examples. They get results. They would probably stop doing it if it weren't valuable. is my assumption. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to fall into the trap of saying that just because somebody was successful and says this is how they do a thing, that's what we should be doing.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I'm saying apparently they think that's what they should be doing. And there might be something that we could learn from them. Maybe it's specific to their industry and it wouldn't work other places. They're the only place that would do it. But like, the fact that this bird can fly means there's probably something we can learn from how the bird evolved and exists today. Right? I'm not saying we should build a bird that's the same, but like, I mean, I think there's probably something you could learn from it, right? And maybe you take it in a different form and apply it in other places. That's all.
Matt, you said, but this is hard. I would challenge that. I don't know that it is hard. It's out of character for what our muscle memory, how, corporate culturally we're used to functioning. Is it different? Absolutely. Now, does that mean that it's hard? I don't know. I mean, I look at these things and I'm thinking, that's pretty straightforward. That looks pretty simple, but it's out of character. It's different from how we are used to operating. And so if that's what you mean, yeah, it can be hard to change behaviors that we've thought previously, oh, well, this is what we always do. Well, we already know that if that's the mantra that you're preaching in your company, well, this is how we've always done it. That's the kiss of death. Goodbye, yes. Blockbuster.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, so it's hard. Another way to say it is it's more work than just accepting the assumptions, I guess, would be another way to say it.
Is it more short-term work? Because, yeah, in the short term, maybe it looks like more work, but once again, it gets into this whole penny wise, pound foolish.
That's fair. Yeah.
Over the long haul, yeah, I know it seems like a lot more work right now. Isn't that the same thing we hear about test-driven development? When we're trying to teach teams to do test-driven development, they're like, oh, no, man, this is a lot of work. Trust me, it's going to save you over the long haul, and it's going to improve your quality. Actually, it's going to improve your quality, and it's going to save you time down the road.
Yeah, but you've got to convince them of that because they're not going to see it naturally.
Yeah. It's sort of counterintuitive in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to sort of run an experiment and prove it to themselves.
Get them to suspend their disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got test-driven development could save time, but they're not going to see it because they don't even acknowledge the loss of time they have right now.
Right.
They think of it, they schedule things to development done, to development first done, right? What's the first point at which the developer says, there, it works? That's what they schedule, right? And it's like, how long is that going to take you? Well, to the first time you can look at it, it's going to take me 3 days. Like, okay, so this is a 3-day feature, except it's then followed by another 3 days of back and forth and another 3 days of validation and then a little bit more back and forth. And they just don't count the rest. So when you come in and say, look at all the time you're going to be saving, all they see is, well, that first 3 days now has to be 5 days because I got to test it as I go. And when they look at the overall scheme, if they looked at the overall scheme, they would say, well, overall 5 days was way shorter than 12 days. Right? But they don't see they think, well, that work is done by a different person, or that work is done by a different department, or that stuff. And right. And we always have that. They're always it's not like we're going to write perfect code. Come on.
Yeah. Looking at the whole thing, looking at the return on investment at the system level, as opposed to like your little local optimization. Yeah. That's what I sort of obtusely described as hard, right? You have to sort of widen your aperture and look at the whole system. So we are coming close to the end of our time box if it's a 1 hour, 10 a.m. Central live stream.
And that would mean that this had better been
an Agile thing, wherein I have been Matt Beam.
And I have been Mike Markey.
And thus far, I am still Jeff Singleton.
So if you're interested, come back next week. It feels like we're going to do this Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Central, with Mike and Jeff and me. And we'll publish these episodes once we edit out all the untoward stuff.
Yeah.
We'll publish those as podcasts.
Most of the
Untoward.
untoward stuff.
And come back and join us and chat us. And, if you want something, you got something to say, maybe we'll invite you into the thing and we can talk and kick you out and it'll be fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks for joining. I think that's it.
Enjoy your Saturday.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.